Hi, everyone. Welcome to Time with the Bible Live. Good to have everyone with us. We have CJ with us here this morning. Glad to have you, CJ.
Good to be here, Curtis. Looking forward to studying.
Yeah, same here. So we've made it our mission in this series of studies to just get to know Jesus better, some of the things that he taught, some of the characteristics of him. Today, we're going to be looking at both of those things as we look at John chapter 11. John 11, which is fitting because a lot of people in the religious world will be given some extra thought to the resurrection of Jesus, and there's some teachings in here about the resurrection. So we'll talk about that here in just a minute. So let's.
That was not purposeful.
How is that? You didn't plan it?
When I chose it, but you're right.
Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and read. Hey, CJ, I'm going to read the first 16 verses and then we'll talk about it. Okay. So John chapter 11, verse 1 says, "Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who appointed the Lord with fragrant oil, or anointed with the Lord with fragrant oil, and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick." When Jesus heard that, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he had heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judah again." And the disciples said to him, "Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you are going there again?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him." These things he said, and after he had said them, "Our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up." And then the disciples said, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well." However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he was speaking about taking rest in sleep. And then Jesus said to them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I am not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him." Then Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." All right, so there's this news that Lazarus is sick. He lives in Bethany, which is about a little outside of Jerusalem, there in Judah, and Mary sends word to him that the one that he loves is sick. How does Jesus respond to that, CJ? How would you describe his response?
Well, feels a little cold, yeah. When you first read a bit in verse 4, he's not really gonna die. Of course, well, if you don't know what Jesus is saying, it might seem cold and standoffish and like it really doesn't matter, but Jesus is saying something greater here, and we'll see that in just a moment.
Yeah, so Lazarus is near death, right? And he's about to die. And I think it is interesting the way he responds in verse 4. He says, "This sickness isn't to death. This is to the glory of God." I think Jesus just saw an opportunity here for something greater. And he's going to, just like back in chapter 4, when I believe it was chapter 4, maybe chapter 5, I can't remember, the blind man who they ask about. And Jesus saw it as an opportunity for his glory to be seen. And I think that's kind of the way that's the way that he's looking at this here, that there's an opportunity here for him to be glorified. And it is interesting that verse 5, it says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So he stayed there 2 more days where he was. I think that's said on purpose, to show that he does, that there was love behind what he was about to do. If you would think that if he loved them, then he would go and be there for Lazarus and even heal Lazarus before he dies.
Right.
But this is to show this is not a coldness. This is something that he's going to do because he loves them and he loves his disciples, and there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, we really see when you first read this part of the text, not knowing the rest of the story, you're kind of left with the impression Jesus doesn't care, Lazarus is not really gonna die. He's not really that sick. And then he says, you know what? I'm not even gonna go there until 2 days after you told me. It's like, what is Jesus doing? But I think the 2 days after will play an important role in the sign that he's about to do in a couple of verses here, that it will strengthen the umph of what Jesus is about to do.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. And so after the 2 days, he tells his disciples, let us go to Judah again. And they have an issue with that. What's their issue, CJ? Why do they have a problem with that plan?
Well, they said, are you sure? But last time you were there, it didn't work out so well. They tried to stone you. And you want to go back?
Yeah. Last time you were there, the Jews were not too happy with you. And look at verse 9. I think Jesus answers, says, are not there 12 hours in a day? There's a whole 12 hours. If anyone walks in the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. They're not going to stone him. It's not his time yet. But if you walk in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. And I think, again, he's talking about being the light of this world. I think he's saying that there's something greater than them persecuting him, but there's an opportunity for the light to be shown and for them to better understand what he's going to go and accomplish.
And just so we have a reference, Jesus is the disciples are referring to the incident in John 8. Whenever Jesus comes in and he has this discussion with the Jews about Abraham, and then at the end of the text, he says, the Jews are confused because they're like, you're speaking as if you've seen Abraham. You're not that old. And then he says, before Abraham was, I am. And that's when they wanted to stone him. So the disciples are like, are you sure you want to go back there? It didn't work out well. Maybe thinking, are you suicidal?
Yeah. Putting yourself in danger is that's the way they're thinking, is that they're going to go and all be put at risk here. And then I think he better explains what he's talking about, this idea of the light. And, all throughout John, there's this there's this parallel between light and darkness. And I think he's trying to say that wherever the light is, there's more understanding, and people can see better. And people there, you know, people there'll be less stumbling. But right now there's darkness, there's resistance, there's people who are trying to persecute him. He's going to go shine some light. And then it says, these things he said after he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I'm going to go that he may wake him up. So what are they thinking when he's talking about sleeping, CJ? What's their...
Well, Lazarus is taking a nap, it's just a nap. He's sick. He's gonna go heal him just like he heals others. But it's interesting to me, this is one of the precedents for the Bible writers talking about death in this way, because this language carries on into even Paul's letters. I think about 1 Corinthians 15. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed. And Jesus says here exactly what he means. He kind of, I think, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but when I look at verse 14, it seems to me it's kind of a sigh moment. Jesus is sighing and just spells it out. Guys, Lazarus is dead. That's what I mean. Lazarus is dead. I think you can hear that tone. Of course, there were many things that Jesus did and said that the apostles didn't quite understand, and this was one of them.
Yeah, the whole idea, the whole teaching of sleeping shows to be a temporary thing. When someone sleeps, unless they die in their sleep, they wake up. And the disciples are thinking, all right, if he's asleep, even if they're thinking to the point of he's just really sick and sleeping, then that's a temporary measure. He's going to wake up. He's going to be well. And but Jesus, I think he clarifies, because again, they're not thinking towards this. I don't know if they completely understand what Jesus says. I know they don't understand when Jesus talks about him going and dying and resurrecting from the dead 3 days later. They don't understand what that means.
Right.
So he's got to clarify that Lazarus is dead. And I'm glad I wasn't there. That's interesting for him to say. I think if he had been there, Lazarus would not have died. Lazarus, and then if he had not died, he wouldn't have been able to teach them some things about the resurrection.
Right.
But for their sakes, he's glad that he wasn't there, that they may believe further.
Verse 15 says another precedent within the Gospel of John. Jesus does some of his miracles in different ways at different times for his disciples. And he says this, I'm glad I wasn't there to heal him before he died, because apparently y'all need this. You guys need me to heal Lazarus like this. So for your sakes, I'm gonna do it this way. He did that. He did that in other places when he healed the blind man in Mark 8. People wonder why he did that in 2 stages. Well, it was doing a lesson in his for his disciples and their spiritual blindness.
Yeah.
See, Jesus often uses his miracles as illustrations for his followers.
Yeah, so the Bible often calls them wonders and signs. There's a reason why it calls them signs, is because they are intended to teach us some things about Jesus. Jesus wasn't just all about healing the sick, because not every sick person was healed by Jesus. Miracles had intentions behind them to teach us something about Jesus, about teach us things about life, and this specific one to teach us about the resurrection. I don't know, as you go through John, I don't know if one of the things that you learn as you go through John, there's a lot of sevens. There's the 7 I am statements. We're going to see another one here in just a little bit. But there's also 7 signs or 7 miracles that Jesus does throughout the book. This is the 7th one, right? As long as you don't count the resurrection of Jesus himself, this is the 7th sign that is intended to help us believe Jesus and believe about him. So this is, it's interesting that the 7th sign is about the resurrection of somebody. And I think that's intended, leading us into believing about the resurrection of Jesus himself. And we'll see that here in just a minute. Look at Thomas's response in verse 16, CJ. How does Thomas respond? And what do you see in Thomas's character when he says this?
Well, I'll be honest, I'm not sure what he means. Let us also go that we may die with him. What do you think, Curtis?
I think what he means is, last time you almost died in Judah, so I guess let's just go to Judah and we'll all die with Lazarus. We'll be laying right next to him in the grave. So I guess he's cooperative in one sense, but he's a little pessimistic. He's the doubter, but he's a little pessimistic here, saying, "Oh, I guess we're going to Judah. We might as well all die." I think that's kind of his perspective. So even though he's cooperative, he's saying, "Okay, we'll go to Judah." But I think you also see pessimism in his character, and you'll see that later when he says, "I won't believe unless I touch the hands and side and your side." So he's just he's a doubter. He's pessimistic. Kind of interesting to see their characters come out and some of the things they say.
We kind of see a lot of character development and growth, especially with Peter in the gospel accounts. All of them come a long ways between what's happening here and then just a book after this in chapter 2 on the day of Pentecost. They're all preaching about, lo and behold, the resurrection. The same thing that they're not understanding here in this text.
That's very true. And you see that throughout the Bible. You see Peter, who is one who denies Christ and denies knowing him, to writing 1 Peter chapter 1, which is all about enduring trials, and chapter 2, which is about adding to your faith and growth. And then you see the sons of thunder, a man like John, who wanted to destroy cities, becoming the disciple of love. They're just great growth in their character and who they are. So you'll see that with really all of them as they grow and develop, and they as you see each one of them. But you just see Thomas's character come out there. Let's go ahead and read the next section, 17 to 27. CJ, you want to read that for us?
So I'm reading from the New King James Version. I just bought a new Bible. yesterday.
Very cool.
Now when Jesus came, he found that he had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary was sitting in the house. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is come into the world.
All right, so Jesus finds out that he's been dead for 4 days. The Jews believe that when somebody dies, the spirit would just hover over the body for 3 days. So this, by the time that Lazarus has been in the grave here, according to the Jews and their thinking, their spirit is long gone. But he draws near to Bethany. He's real close to Jerusalem. It's not real far. Yeah, it's about 2 miles away, 2 miles outside of the town of Jerusalem. And there had already been several Jews that had gathered around Martha and Mary to try to comfort them in this really difficult time. It's really hard when you lose somebody. But what do you see in Martha here, CJ? How does Martha respond when she hears that the Lord is near?
She would respond how we all would respond if we had the Lord with us. I'm friends with the Lord. This should not have happened. If you would have been here, Lazarus would be alive. I mean, that to me tells us a lot about her faith and what Jesus could do. He knew Jesus could do something. She didn't know the full extent of Jesus, but I believe she knew Jesus could do something about the predicament.
Yeah, I think you're right. She's not wrong. If Jesus had been there, he would have been able to do something, be able to help. But it is interesting. Verse 22, she says, even now I know that if you ask God, he could do whatever you ask him to do, that he would give you. And I think she's right along this right lines, that he can accomplish more than just healing him when he was sick. So Jesus tells her, your brother's going to heal again, or going to rise again. And what is Martha thinking? What's her thoughts?
Yeah, she says, yeah, I know that, Lord. I know he'll rise again in the last day, which is also remarkable. We could just sit and wonder, how in the world did she know this? She must have been following Jesus.
Yeah. Well, back in chapter 5, he said that there was going to be 2 resurrections, that there was a resurrection that now is in those who hear the voice of Jesus, and they were going to resurrect in this life and be given life.
Right.
But then he says that there's going to be a resurrection that was to come, that when all who are in the graves will hear his voice and be resurrected, some to the resurrection condemnation, some to the resurrection of life. So she apparently comprehended all of that. She understood that there was going to be a resurrection day, a day when all the graves would be emptied and all the bodies would rise. And so she says, Lord, I know that one day he will rise again.
Jesus says, no, I don't mean that. I mean today.
Yeah.
I am the resurrection and the life. I can make this happen right now. And it's interesting just to give a big picture. We see two conversations. This one and then the next section. Two different needs in times of grief. Martha needs a deep theological conversation, but Mary needs something totally different, and we'll see that in just a minute here. Sorry, I kind of jumped the gun.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So, yeah, we'll see that here in a minute. What do you see the differences of the characteristics of Martha versus Mary? I mean, as you go throughout John or throughout some of the other gospels as well, you see like a difference between the two of them in their character.
Well, Martha is like a lot of people. She wants the logistics. Why? She wants a logical reason for why Jesus wasn't there, and what Jesus can do. It's amazing to me that she knew about the resurrection, but she didn't even stop to think about that Jesus could do anything else for her after Lazarus had died. Because if you think about it, if I have my timing right, I don't know. Does Jairus' daughter come before or after this?
I'm not sure about the timing of it all.
This may have been the first time someone has been resurrected.
If I had a guess, that would be my guess. I'm trying to think where Jairus' daughter would fit into timeline wise. But yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure. May have been.
If it is, Jesus has not done anything like this before. And so that's not even a question. Can you raise Lazarus? Because she hasn't seen, she doesn't know if Jesus has that power. But what she does know is there'll be resurrection. There's hope there.
Yeah.
The resurrection, millions of people around the world on Sunday are going to be focusing in on the resurrection. And that resurrection gives people hope. And it gave Martha hope.
Yeah.
Because she knew there was going to be resurrection of the dead. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, you're fine.
No.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Martha does need the logistics. She seems to be the more outspoken one. Like, Jesus, tell her to come help me in the kitchen so that I'm not the only one working here, and Mary seems to be maybe a little bit more quiet than her, a little bit more reserved. And you kind of see that in their characters as you go through here. But he says, I am the resurrection and the life. There's one of those I am statements of Jesus. And he says, do you believe that anybody that that lives in me, that believes in me, shall never die. They shall live. And she says, I do believe, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God, who's come into the world. What an incredible incredible statement of faith. Let's go ahead and read. You mentioned the second conversation. Let's read 28 to 37. I'll read that one for us, okay?
Okay.
And when she had said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher is come and is calling for you. And as soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw Mary rise up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, she is going to the tomb to weep there. And then when Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who'd come in with her weeping, he groaned in his spirit and was troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. And then Jesus wept, and the Jews said, see how he loved him. And some of them said, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying? All right, so he calls for Mary, and Mary quickly goes out to him. All the comforters and probably a lot of them were like professional grievers. Back then, when somebody died, people would gather together and they too would openly weep so that they would make the family feel more comfortable in their grieving. So they go out and they think, well, she's going to the tomb to grieve. Let's go with her. But instead of going to the tomb, she's headed towards where Jesus is. I'm not sure where that is. It's outside the town somewhere. Maybe he's keeping his distance for the sake of the Jews who were trying to kill him at this point. But when she comes to Jesus, the first thing that she does, she runs up to him, she falls down at his feet, and she says, what, Marshall? Or CJ?
Well, the same thing that Martha says.
Yeah.
Mary says, Lord, if you were here, Lazarus would be alive right now. They start at the same place Martha and Mary do in their conversation with Jesus. But as you read through here, it is totally different. You don't see a deep theological discussion on the resurrection here. You see Jesus giving his shoulder to cry out. And I think that maybe I'm stretching this, but Jesus can do both. Jesus can be there when we need somebody to teach us, and Jesus can be there just to comfort.
Yeah.
Just to be there.
Yeah, I think that's what you see here. Jesus saw them weeping, and it says he groaned in his spirit and was troubled. What do you think he was troubled about?
Well, could be a few things. First, I think back to the beginning of the text, the relationship between Jesus and Lazarus. In verse 3, he's called the one whom the Lord loved. And so it's hard when somebody that close dies. So that could be a reason, but maybe another reason could be what we see in the book of Romans in chapter 12, where Jesus, when Paul says we need to rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Now, Jesus knows the end of the story. Jesus knows how this is going to end. Lazarus in the next section, his stinky body is going to come up out of that too. That's how this ends, but right now, he feels the emotion of a friend who just died, and people need emotion right now. They don't need. You don't go into a funeral saying, all right, everybody stop the service. I'm gonna just raise them up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that would be jarring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I read this, I don't know. Perhaps what bothers him is their emotion and the grieving that they're experiencing at this point. I don't know if he is so much sad over what happened to Lazarus, in the sense that he knows that he's going to be standing right next to him here in just a few minutes. He's going to be right back with him. I wonder if part of the reason he groaned in his spirit and was troubled was perhaps their lack of faith. They're groaning and they're weeping, and they don't understand what he's capable of, that he is the resurrection and the life, like he just finished telling Martha. But instead, they're thinking, well, it's too late. There's nothing he can do. Because in verse 37, they said, could this man who opened the eyes of the blind not have kept this man from dying? It was like too late to call for the healer, because, if he was here earlier, he could have done something, but he can't do anything now. So I wonder if part of what's bothering him and part of the reason he weeps is because of these people's lack of understanding of what he's capable of doing, and their lack of understanding of his control over life and death. I'm not sure, but maybe it is that he's just weeping because he sees how upset, how grieved they are by what happened to somebody that he loved. That's a possibility too.
Well, if your best friend, if your best friend died, and you would feel the weight of that, regardless.
Sure.
Regardless if you can heal him, the fact that he was gone,
Mm-hmm.
it could be unbelief, but the reason why there's nothing, there's nothing for Jesus to draw on for uh for their faith. There's nothing. There's not a miracle like this for for them to look forward to it. And when you get to Mark 6 or Mark 8, when Jesus is in the boat with his disciples talking about the leaven of the Pharisees, and his disciples think he's talking about bread, then he's annoyed because he says, "Look, uh, I just did this miracle. I
Mhm.
could provide for you, but here, there's nothing. There hasn't been a resurrection story like this
Nothing
going
to draw off of.
right."
Yeah, I just wonder though if he's not part of what's going on though is just he's seeing all their grieving and all that they've experienced, and maybe it is partly that they're grieved, but maybe it is also partly that he wants them to believe. He wants them to see that there's hope after this life, and they're just not grasping that. In verse 35, it says Jesus wept, and the Jews said, well, see how much he loved him. Well, he did love him. He did love him. I don't think he wept over Lazarus, though, in the sense that he knew he'd be standing right next to him here in just a minute. I think part of it is that just maybe the compassion part.
I'm not trying to discount anything you said. I think it's really possible that, just like you said it, when he groans in the spirit of his disciples, it is because they don't believe. So that's likely too.
Yeah. We remember the reason he told his disciples he was going, and it was a good opportunity, was so that they might believe. So he's ready to teach them something. This is something he wants everyone to understand about this. So let's go ahead and read. We're kind of running over. So let's read let's just read 38 to 44, and then we'll stop there. And would you like to read that for us, CJ?
Sure. Then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there's a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was laying, and Jesus lifted his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. And I know that you always hear me, but because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Now when he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out bound hand and foot with gray clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, loose him and let him go.
Go ahead and read 45, and we'll stop there.
Then many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him.
All right, again, it says Jesus groaned in himself. And so he goes to the tomb. It was a normal tomb back then for those who had money to purchase something like that. It would have been a cave that was cut out of the stone, and there was a stone rolled over it. You see that in Jesus's burial as well. And Jesus tells them, he says, take away the stone. And Mary's like, wait a minute, he's been in there 4 days. His body is already starting to smell. It's too late to open up the tomb, because they would do that. They did that 3 days after Jesus's body had been in there. But at some point, the body's going to start smelling, and it's too late for them to roll that back and do anything to his body. And Jesus says, wait a minute, remember our conversation? Remember what I told you about those that believe. You're gonna see the glory of God. And so they rolled away the stone anyways. And the dead man was laying there. And Jesus says this prayer. CJ, do you have something?
No, I was just gonna say, they would probably think, Lord, we can already start to smell with the tomb closed. Why in the world did you want to open it? It's already bad enough.
Yeah. So he says this prayer, and he says, Father, I think that you've heard me. You always hear me. And he says, because of the people standing here, that I want them to believe that you sent me. And so he says, Lazarus, come forth. And what happens?
He comes out in his grave clothes. His face is still wrapped in a cloth, and Jesus says, unbind him, let him go. Couple interesting things I see there. He says specifically, Lazarus, come forth. Now, could you imagine? And I'm not saying Jesus had to say Lazarus' name, but could you imagine if he just had said, come forth, and possibly all the graves open up? I don't know if that's intentional. He probably could have just said, come forth. But it's interesting that they named him Lazarus, come forth. And maybe there's another reason to that. People need to recognize Lazarus is the one who had died. And also, Lazarus says, it says in the text that Lazarus has burial clothes wrapped about his face. I'm just wondering how he knew which way to go.
His eyes were covered or something like that.
It's a dark tomb, but when you hear the voice of Jesus, you find your way out.
Yeah, I wonder if he calls them by name to give just confirmation to the people that are standing there.
Yeah.
Like, this is not some cheap trick. It's not calling someone to come out and then someone, dressed in grave clothes came out, to trick everybody. But it was actually Lazarus himself. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know why he called him by name. But in case you doubted, he was covered in all the wrappings that they had placed on his body to prepare it for the burial, for the burial. And Jesus says, loose him and let him go. There's maybe a double saying that he loosed the bounds of death from Lazarus, just like he will loose the bounds of death for himself. And then one day he will loose the bindings of death from us as well. And that's when the last enemy will be conquered, and we'll have life, as John 5 talks about. As 1 Corinthians 15 talks about, the last enemy will be conquered. The amazing thing about Jesus's resurrection, if we were to get there, which we're not going to get there, Jesus's resurrection is not just for God to say, hey, look what I did. It's, hey, look what I can do for you.
Yes.
Because this resurrection was to point to the time in which he himself would be in a grave.
That's right.
And would resurrect from the dead. And then his resurrection is to point us to our own resurrection.
That's right.
That's where we find our hope. And as 1 Corinthians 15, as Paul draws, he says, if Jesus didn't resurrect from the dead, hypothetically, because there's all this proof that he did it. 500 people or more saw him at one time, the resurrected Lord. But if he didn't resurrect from the dead, then we too, then there would be no resurrection for us either. And everything that we do in faith, everything, worship, baptism, everything that we do is just worthless. But because he was resurrected from the dead, we too have hope that one day we will come out of our graves and we'll have life. Al said that would be scary. It would be scary to see a man come out of the grave all wrapped up like a mummy.
Beautifully.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And all these people are seeing this man that they knew was dead. He wasn't just sick or asleep, but he was indeed dead, and he was indeed now alive. Yeah.
Hey, Collins.
Hi, Collins. Glad to have you with us.
Well, I really enjoyed the study, Chris. Thank you for having me on it. I know we went a little longer than you normally do with these, so that might be my fault, but it's just it's a meaty text. There's so much more we could get out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. We could keep reading and talking about how they reacted to it. Some believed, some went to the Pharisees and told them like they would want to know this, and they do, probably not for the right reason.
Right.
But as you'll see later on, it says that because of this very thing, they sought to kill him all the more.
That's right.
Yeah. So this was going to be a breaking point to where they were just all out attacking him at some point later on. So, I'm glad that you came on. Glad to have you again, CJ, on the program, and
we'll
have you back on some other time.
Anytime, brother. You're doing some good work. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Al, for watching and participating. Glad that you were able to be on here as well. Yeah, I'm glad that everybody who's been on today, we've fluctuated in the number of times people have seen or how many people have seen. But if you didn't get to see the beginning and you came in at the end, you're always welcome to go back here in just a few minutes. The recording will be on there, so make sure you go back and watch the whole thing, and that may be a benefit to you. And it's certainly been a benefit to me today to have studied John 11. So
yeah.
All right, everybody. That's the end of our study, but thank you for participating. Yeah, Collins is from Kenya.
So, all right, thank you.
The other side of the world. Yeah, far away from here have joined, and glad you're able to be on here and watch as well. So, but everybody have a good day, and God bless.
God bless.